The salt didn't taste right anymore. Oren crouched at the edge of the flats, his knees crackling as he ran a rough finger through the crystal sheen that stretched out endlessly before him. The ground sparkled beneath the low blue sun, each granule like frozen light. But where once the salt had crunched dry and clean beneath his boots, it now clung wetly to his skin, sticky and sour like sweat after a fever. He brought it to his tongue, bitter to bitter. Again that made 3 days in a row. He rose, brushing white dust from his knees. His harvest pails hung half full on the rig, swaying in the wind that whispered over the skeletal ridges. The land was drying faster than usual, not cracking, no, not evaporating. It was weeping. Something beneath the flats was crying salt. The others had already left weeks ago, spooked by the tremors. The Great Salt Basin had been their livelihood for generations, but no one stayed once the ground started sobbing. Only Oren remained. Oren and the bones of his father buried by the shore, and the crooked shack that cracked when the night wind howled. He would have left too, if not for the woman. She came walking alone through the salt mist the morning the sun rose in silence. He had seen her silhouette first, long-limbed and slight, her head bowed beneath a tattered black veil. Her robes whispered along the crusted earth, leaving no footprints. Her stride was steady, as if the flats were familiar. No one came from that direction. The temple lay that way, half buried in the salt like a drowning beast. The ancient ziggurat was cursed, everyone said so. The priests who once kept it alive had fled when the stars shifted and the sea dried up. Some said the temple had demanded blood to keep the waters in place. Others whispered the priests drowned in salt beneath its stones, becoming its new voice. But this woman had come from its path, and she did not look afraid. Oren watched her from a distance, crouched on a rock above his rig. He was used to solitude, had grown into it like a second skin. But her presence vibrated through the salt air in a way that pulled at something deeper than curiosity. She wasn't lost, she was returning. When he finally approached her, she was kneeling at the edge of a salt pond that hadn't existed yesterday. The basin was shallow, more like a bowl melted into the flats. At its center, a single stone rose carved, ancient, marked with runes. Salt lapped at its base like a tide trying to remember how to be an ocean. She didn't look up when he spoke. You're going toward it, aren't you? Still, silence. I wouldn't, he added. The land's not quiet anymore. Her voice was low, rough. It never was. Oren shifted uneasily. You'll die in there. She turned then, lifting her veil. Her face was scarred, not from fire or battle, but as if something had once tried to write on her skin, symbols etched across her cheek and brow, faded like old ink on worn parchment. I already did, she said. She stood and began walking again. Oren didn't follow. Not then. That night, he dreamed of the temple. It pulsed beneath the flats like a buried heart. Salt crept along the corners of the sky. In the dream, the woman knelt at the stone again, but the water had turned red. She looked up, and it was his face that stared back at him, reflected in her eyes, older, hollow, ashen. He woke choking on dry air. Sweat soaked into his thin sleeping robe. The salt walls of his shack flaked and groaned, the wind clawing against the eaves like fingernails. Somewhere far off, a whisper rose, a voice not heard by ears, but remembered in bones. The next morning, he followed her. The path wound between dead ridges and dried wells, through gullies that had once channeled sea tides. Now they were cracked and dead, the earth white and broken. The temple rose ahead, its black stone steps caked in crusted salt. Half of it had collapsed into the basin, and the part that remained stood crooked against the horizon, like a jaw, jutting from a rotted skull. He found her at the threshold, fingers pressed to the frame of the arch. You should go, she said without turning. It doesn't know your name. That a good thing. She was quiet. Then, it remembers pain best. Names tied to sorrow, regret, desire unfulfilled. The taste of it lingers, and yours, Nilly. She whispered. The name tasted like ash. She stepped forward and vanished into the dark. Oren hesitated, but something had taken root in him. Not fear, not desire. Recognition. He descended the steps into the ruin. Inside, the air was colder. Salt crusted the walls like veins of white fungus. Strange carvings shimmered under the touch of his lantern, forms twisted in dance or struggle, hands reaching upward from beneath waves, mouths open in silent scream or song. He found her standing in the center of a circular chamber. A dry basin filled the floor, shallow and wide, like a drain pool. Carved into the stone at its center was a mouth open, lined with teeth, too many teeth. The beast below the temple. She didn't look at him. "I thought I imagined you," she said. "You didn't, but you've changed." He frowned. "We've never met." Now she turned to him. Her eyes milky at the edges, but sharp with some inner light, held him like a tether. "No, not in this life." She stepped into the basin, barefoot, her robes dragging. The moment her foot touched the moth's edge, the room breathed. Salt fell from the ceiling like ash. "I came here to forget," she whispered. "But it won't let me." Oren stepped closer. "Forget what?" "That I once loved someone who died feeding this thing." The mouth in the floor pulsed again. Nilly knelt at its edge and whispered words Oren didn't understand, some older tongue. Worn thin by grief, the carvings on her face pulsed faintly. She reached into her robe and withdrew a shard of pale stone, flecked with dried blood. She placed it into the beast's mouth. It swallowed and spoke, not aloud but into the air, into the salt, into the skin. Oren. He staggered back. The voice wasn't hers. It wasn't his, but it used his voice, like something peeling it from his throat and making it echo backwards in time. "I don't," he gasped. "What is this?" Nilly rose. "It remembers you, but I've never been here before." She looked at him, pain cracking her expression like weathered stone. "You never left." The salt basin began to flood. Slowly, gently, the dry chamber filled with brine. Oren stared at the water. Then at her. Did I feed it to her? Hand reached toward him, hesitant, unsure. "I don't know," she said. "But the beast below remembers a man who died for love, and whose voice was softer than the silence he left behind." Oren stepped into the basin. The water soaked into his boots. It was warm. He took her hand. They didn't leave that day, nor the next. They lit a small fire at the edge of the basin, and as the days passed, the beast slept, or listened. Nilly told him of her exile, how her order had cast her out for returning to the temple, how they had erased her name from their scrolls. "I wasn't trying to free it," she said. "I only wanted to know if it still remembered him. And now it remembers me. Maybe you're him." Returned. "I'm just a salt harvester." She smiled sadly. "Then why does your voice make it tremble?" On the seventh day, Oren dreamed of her. Not as she was now, but younger, laughing, running barefoot across salt flats that glistened like mirrors. He was there too. He knew her. She was hiding something behind her back. When he reached for it, she whispered, "Don't forget me next time." He woke with her curled against his side. The salt mist drifted through the temple. Slow and reverent, they said nothing, but her fingers found his, and their hands remained entwined as the brine beneath them began to rise again, quietly, gently, like memory returning. When the soldiers buried his brother under moonlight, no one noticed the shadow that lingered behind the ancient altar. The pool beside the grave still shimmered strangely, as if it remembered the face of the man who had aged to dust in a matter of breaths. That face, once young and noble, had collapsed in on itself like a wilted fruit, and now even his bones seemed unsure whether they belonged to a man or a legend. The boy who had watched it happen, Taran, had fled, not from fear of what he'd seen, but from the terrible understanding that it would happen again. A week passed. The soldiers continued their mourning with drink, brawls, and the kinds of laughter that only grief could birth. Taran didn't laugh. He stared at the pool. He kept watching it even when he was sent out to hunt. Even when she arrived, she wore a coat made of feathers, not stitched, not sewn, but grown. Her hair was smoke and her skin pale, like someone carved her from moonlight and regret. Taran knew what the others thought, that she was a scavenger or a spirit, or both. She called herself Vera, and she asked him where the helmet was. He didn't answer, not right away. How could he? "You're not like the others," she said, walking past the cook fire with bare feet that never left prints. He ignored her. She sat beside him, offering no greeting. "You were there when he drank, weren't you?" His silence confirmed it. "He wasn't the first," she said softly. "He won't be the last." Taran finally turned. What are you? She smiled. Not unkindly. I'm the one who buried the warrior, the one whose helmet he touched. Terran blinked. You knew him. I loved him. That changed everything. For they talked for hours after the fire died down. Vera's voice was a song made of dusk. She told stories not in words, but in the weight behind them, about the old wars, about cursed waters, about warriors who swore to never let their essence be used again by the living. I warned him, she said. I told him what the water does. He was thirsty, Terran said. He was greedy, she corrected. There's a difference. She stood, brushing ash from her knees. If you want to understand what happened, you have to follow me. And if you do, you'll change too. How? You'll see them. Who? The ones who age backward. 5 the next day, they walked far from camp. Terran carried nothing but a blade and a canteen. Vera brought only silence. They reached a grove no one remembered planting. Every tree was bent away from a single massive stone basin, a pool, ringed in carvings, rimmed with red moss. This is the mirror grave, she whispered. Drink from it and your past will come for you. I'm not drinking, Terran said. She smiled. Not yet. He looked into the water and saw eyes. Not his, not hers. Someone else. Something else. Do you see them? She asked. I think so. Then you've already begun. 6 that night, Terran dreamt of wars he never fought. He wore armor that fit too well, held swords too heavy for his arms. And bled from wounds shaped like forgotten names. In the morning, he didn't remember all the details, only that he'd looked down and seen his face changing one wrinkle at a time. Vera waited with tea and salted roots. It's starting, she said gently. The helmet chose you too. He sat beside her. Why me? Because you were kind. You wept. You didn't steal from the dead. You witnessed, and the helmet remembers that. Terran swallowed hard. I don't want to change. She placed a hand over his. But I already see it in your eyes. 7 days pass. He returned to the soldiers' camp briefly, but they didn't recognize him at first. His jaw had hardened. His hair grew darker, more like his father's than his own. He had a new voice, one older, deeper. They laughed until one of them stepped close and saw the eyes, not Terran's. The same strange ones from the pool. They whispered behind his back. They said he had been cursed by the ghost woman in the feather coat. And maybe he had. But Terran didn't care, because every time he closed his eyes, he saw flashes of Vera's lost love, the warrior whose helmet had been left behind. And he felt the way she had loved him. 8 one night, Terran stood before Vera by the water again. You said I'd change if I followed you, he said. You have, she replied. You've become someone who listens, someone who sees. She stepped close, lifting his hand to her heart. It beat slow, steady. But there's something else, she murmured. The pool gave you more than memory. What? It gave you him, pieces of him. Terran froze. You mean, you're not him, but you're becoming, and part of me hates that, because I lost him once. I can't bear to lose him again. Terran whispered. I'm not him, I know, she said, eyes softening. But sometimes when you smile, I almost forget. 9 They kissed beneath a canopy of dying stars. It wasn't passionate. It wasn't desperate. It was quiet, tender, like morning. Because Vera kissed a man whose past was being rewritten, who might not be the same person tomorrow, who might become a stranger again. And Terran, though he didn't say it aloud, knew the truth. He had loved her before, in another life, a warrior's life. And now, his soul was remembering the shape of her touch. 10 But the helmet wasn't done. The next morning, he woke to find Vera missing. Her feather coat lay draped across a tree, trembling in the wind. The pool had gone dry, and Terran's reflection showed a different face again, older, wiser, and behind him, carved newly into the stone, a warning: do not steal what the dead have given. The merchant's vessel fell apart mid-orbit. Not in a blaze, not with fanfare, but like paper torn underwater. Its seams simply gave a slow, silent splitting, unnoticed by the neighboring ships, and from the rupture, drifting out with old rations and coils of loose wiring, was a man barely conscious, wrapped in vines that had no place in metal space. The emergency net scooped him up. His body was gaunt, wrapped in soil-flecked linen. Across his chest, painted in a fluid red-brown dye, was a glyph no one on the patrol vessel recognized. They took him to quarantine level 3, deep beneath the reactor room, behind the decontamination locks. There, the guards watched from behind mirrored glass as his body spasmed. Something under his skin writhed, not mechanical, not parasitic. Something older. When he opened his eyes, they were cloudy with age, but the vitals projected above his bed suggested a man no older than 30. They sent for a xenocultural interpreter, someone who didn't flinch at glyphs or mysterious plant growth, someone not bound to the rules of science, but to its stranger. Siblings, myth, ruin, memory. Her name was Velen, and she had seen death in 6 languages. She stepped into the isolation cell without a mask. The guards shouted in protest, but she waved them off. His breath isn't what kills, she muttered. He was awake now, sitting, wrinkles carved across his cheeks in mismatched patterns, as if they'd been drawn on hastily by an amateur sculptor. His hair was thick, but with streaks of white that shifted whenever he blinked. "Do you know where you are?" Velen asked. He didn't answer, but he looked at her, really looked, not like most subjects, no fear, no confusion, just recognition. Like he knew she'd come. "You drank from it, didn't you?" she said softly, from the warrior's helmet. His eyes flickered. She sat across from him. "Tell me your name." His throat worked hard before the whisper came out. "I can't remember, but I know yours." Velen stiffened. He leaned forward. "You were in the garden." Her voice dropped. "What garden?" "The one under the sand, where roots sang in the dark." He smiled. "Faint. You planted the seed. Didn't you wonder what would grow?" Velen's heart kicked once hard. That wasn't possible. That expedition had been a decade ago, on a dead world. She had buried one seed in a dry ravine where no wind blew. As part of a ritual, a test, the dreamers had said it would never sprout. But what if it had? "What did you see there?" she asked. The man, the stranger with mismatched age, whispered. "I drank the memory, and it remembered you." They studied him for hours, days. His body aged and reversed. Hands that shriveled overnight would be youthful again by morning. A beard would grow, then fall away in seconds. His voice changed octaves mid-sentence. But he never forgot Velen, even when he forgot himself. She brought him food, books. She told him stories in Old Quarnic, and he laughed at all the wrong parts. His eyes never lost that depth, not deep like wisdom, but like a well that led somewhere far beneath time. She asked once, "Do you feel pain?" He shook his head. "Only when I'm far from you." Velen scoffed, but her heart jumped again. The guards noticed she lingered after her reports were done. They joked quietly, but none dared step inside the room, because the vines growing from his spine were flowering now. Silver blue blossoms that tracked her movements, that closed when she left. One night, Velen found a petal in her hair after she'd gone home. She stared at it, trembling. She didn't remember brushing her head near him, but the flower was unmistakable. She didn't report it. Instead, she brought it back the next day and showed it to him. He smiled softly. "You're blooming too." "I'm not infected," she snapped, but her hand trembled. "No, not infected." He reached toward her, fingers wrinkled like crumpled maps, intertwined, against protocol. She let him touch her. A warmth spread from her wrist. Not heat, not chemical, but recognition, as if her skin remembered something from long ago. She gasped. He withdrew. "You feel it now," he said. "What are you?" "I was nothing, until your seed found me. Now I am root in rain and ruin, and I remember the names of things even when I forget my own." She took a breath. "And what name do you give me?" His voice was hoarse, reverent. "Origin." That night, Velen dreamed of a tree beneath a starless sky. Its bark was silver. Its leaves whispered her name. She reached to touch it and awoke, sobbing. Her arms were tin green where veins met skin. She knew what it meant. The transfer was beginning. He was not a disease. He was a cycle. They planned to move him. The station's board had voted. He was too unstable, too unpredictable, a potential biothreat. Velen objected. She threatened resignation. They didn't care. So she broke him out. Not with a weapon, but with a touch. When she entered the cell, his body was crumpled, mid-transformation, one hand youthful, the other bone. He looked at her and whispered, "They want to bury me again." "They'll never find you," she said, and when her hand touched his, the vines exploded outward not violently, but with silent determination. They tore through the ceiling panels, curled around beams, burst open the metal hatch. And together, they fled. She brought him to the edge of the old station rings, where the emergency arboretum still clung to a forgotten life support grid. They called it the Green Arc. It was failing, but as he stepped inside, the air grew sweet. The vines lifted from his back like wings. Blossoms opened on the trees. Soil renewed beneath their feet. Velen stood in the center of it, breathless. "You're healing it." He turned to her. His face was no longer shifting. It was still lined but with symmetry, with purpose, a face that had chosen its age. He cupped her cheek. "You're healing me." They remained hidden for 3 days before the patrols noticed. By then, the arc was glowing, radiating a new ecosystem, broadcasting frequencies not meant for technology but for hearts, for memory. And one night, under a canopy of silver light, Velen leaned into him and whispered, "I'm scared." He nodded. "You should be. But I still want to know." He held her, vines curling around them like blankets, and as their lips met, the garden whispered a name. Elrith, his name, remembered again. And he smiled into the kiss. "You brought me back." They were found the next morning, but the team that entered didn't arrest them. They stood frozen in the doorway, breath caught, because every guard who stepped into the ark wept. Not from sadness, from memory, from something returned. One fell to her knees and said, "I saw my brother's face, the one we buried." Another whispered, "My daughter's laughter." She was 3 again. And the bored cold and skeptical called it a mass hallucination. But others came. People who had lost something. And in the garden, they found it again. Velen and Elrith remained at the center, no longer test subjects. Now, caretakers of memory, of healing, of love grown from forgotten seeds. The ruins were older than memory, older than the empires built atop them, older even than the bones the archaeomancers whispered to in their dreaming rituals. Drevin had reached the heart of the complex. Behind him, the torch-bearing specters of his guilt lingered in silence, faces of the comrades he'd let fall, the warrior whose helmet he'd drunk from, the boy who had trusted him to lead them out, all of them flickering shades that walked just outside the light, just beyond his grasp. Ahead, the pit yawned. Smooth, obsidian black stone formed a ring around it. No edges chipped, no glyphs faded, as though time hadn't dared touch this place. He stepped to the edge and looked in. The pit was full of nothing, not blackness, worse, a clarity so perfect it hurt to look at, as if the void refused to lie, refused to offer the comfort of darkness. And yet, floating in that emptiness was a single pane of mirror glass, suspended by no thread. It gleamed with a silver light that pulsed with every heartbeat in his ears. He took one cautious step closer. He had already aged years since the helmet. His skin bore the deep grooved marks of sudden time. His left eye twitched with a tremor he couldn't stop. But it was his soul that had changed more than his body. That was what the others couldn't see. The rust behind his thoughts, the voices he could almost hear. He stepped again. The mirror didn't show his reflection. Not the man he was now, gray-bearded, tired, broken. Instead, it showed what he might become. He fell to his knees. The man in the mirror was cloaked in emerald armor, lined with curling runes and etched in blood and gold. A warlord, a tyrant, a being of immense power. The reflection smiled, but it was not a kind smile. It was the smile of one who had conquered everything, then grown bored of victory. The smile of a man who ruled time itself, and had no idea what mercy felt like anymore. Drevin tried to look away, but the pit held him. The mirror leaned forward and spoke. "You feared dying forgotten," it said, voice like glass cracking. "Underwater, but the fate you drank is worse. You will live remembered. You will become the tale others tell to warn their children." "No," Drevin breathed, shaking. "No. I came to stop this. You came too late. You drank too early. The seed is already planted." He clenched his fists. "I still have a choice." The mirror twisted. It became 100 shards. Each shard showed a different Drevin, some noble, some cruel, some crying in chains, some burning cities, some alone in caves. one standing beside a child holding a book with glowing pages. The possibilities, his futures, and somewhere deep within one shard where he was still him, still whole, still gentle, still good. He focused on that one. The others pulsed angrily, screamed without sound. The tyrant version of himself pressed its hand against the glass, furious. Drevin stood. The pit tried to pull him in, but this time, he did not flinch. I won't become you. He raised his arm. The bones of his wrist cracked under the weight of age. But he didn't stop. He lifted the half-shattered helmet from his pack, the one he'd drunk from the one that had started it all, and hurled it into the pit. The mirror, cracked out, a fracture raced across its surface like lightning through the soul. Then the pit screamed, not with a voice, but with memory. Drevin fell backward as images flooded his mind. The warrior whose helmet he had taken, dying not in bitterness but in trust. The water drawn from a sacred spring, never meant for mortals. The curse, not one of punishment but of preparation. The mirror, not a prison, a test, and he had passed it. Or perhaps he had simply not failed. The pit's light dimmed. When Drevin rose again, he was still old, still weary, but the whispering shades were gone. His hands were steady, and behind him, the first rays of dawn broke over the shattered ruins. The temple collapsed 3 days later. No trace of the pit remained, but the village boy who had once looked up to Drevin returned to find the old man walking the cliffs, carving stories into the rocks. Not of conquest, not of power, but of possibility, of every future that might still be saved. The desert winds howled as if mourning what had been lost and what was yet to be. At the base of the crumbled shrine, Heaven knelt older now, visibly so. His hands trembled, though not from fear, but from the sheer weight of the memories pressing inside him. Talus watched him from across the fire. Her gaze no longer held suspicion, only sadness. They had both seen too much. "You shouldn't have done it," she said softly. He raised the cracked helmet again, now dry, now silent. "I needed to know." Talus's lips pressed into a tight line. "And what did you learn, Heaven of the Outer Rings?" He stared into the flames. "I wasn't just drinking water. I was drinking a death, a final act, a decision. The warrior's last thought." He nodded slowly. "No, his last sacrifice. He wasn't trying to save himself when he died with this helmet full. He was trying to save someone else." A long silence. "And now I remember who." Talus blinked. "You're saying it was me." She went still, then slowly stood. "You were in another life, another time. I was a child then, left behind during the siege. He found me, gave me his helmet, told me to drink." And then the images flashed behind Heaven's eyes, walls in flame, smoke-choked cries, and a figure, bleeding from a dozen wounds, handing him the helmet. "Then I ran. I survived. But that was over 100 years ago." "I know," Heaven whispered. "Which means what I drank was his memory, his essence. The helmet had absorbed it. Somehow, through time, dust, magic. I drank a life not just of water but of time." Talus came closer, crouching beside him. "And now my own time is slipping, faster. The more I remember, the older I become. It's the cost." She looked into his eyes. "You could die in days, Heaven." He smiled faintly. "I've already lived a lifetime in a week." Talus looked away, unsure what emotion to feel. "Then let me carry it." "What?" "The helmet, the memory. You gave me a piece of yours when we touched. I know, I saw it. The fire, the boy, the warrior. I felt the same guilt. You were there." He asked, stunned. "No," she said, softly. "But I was the one he was fighting to protect the boy. From my people. The invaders, the black-clad raiders with ash-fire rifles. My grandmother told stories of her youth and what she did. She might have been there." Heaven looked at her with a strange mixture of hate and wonder. "I carry the blood of the ones who caused that pain," she continued. "But I don't want to repeat it. Let me carry the memory to share the burden. The helmet." He hesitated. "It might kill you. It's already killing you." They sat in silence again. Around them, the winds began to change direction. A faint glow shimmered on the horizon, neither sun nor moon, but something else. The temple they had discovered together had changed too. Vines now curled around the broken stone. The air vibrated faintly with presence. "The ancients," Heaven whispered. They've returned. Talus glanced at the temple. Or maybe they never left. Maybe they're inside us now. She took the helmet gently. Its surface shimmered for a second, like a drop of mercury. Then nothing. But Heaven's hand steadied. His breath deepened. The burden was lighter. You really felt it? He asked. The warrior's grief? I felt all of him, she replied. And I saw your face in his final thoughts. He didn't just save a boy. He saved the future. Their eyes met. You're not just anyone, she said. You're a vessel, like the helmet, a bearer of memory. He chuckled, a decaying relic. But Talus smiled, not anymore. Behind them, the temple doors groaned opening slowly, revealing a corridor bathed in amber light. They exchanged a glance. This isn't over, she whispered. No, Heaven said. It's just beginning. They stepped inside, leaving. The helmet on the sand. But as the temple closed behind them, the helmet pulsed once then shattered into dust.